Aloha, welcome to the Live Ukulele podcast. My name is Brad Bordessa, and in this episode, I want to tell you about a few, but not all, a few of the ways that you can be an annoying ukulele player. We talk a lot about the things that you can do right to sound good and to play well, or even to perform well or write songs, things like that. But it can also be helpful to think about the things that you shouldn't be. Things that tend to rub other players kind of the wrong way. So we'll explore some of those. I'll gripe a little bit, and hopefully you can learn some things about kind of the inverse of playing ukulele. Just want to let you know that the Live Ukulele podcast and liveukulele.com are ad-free and 100% user-supported. So if you like what you hear, please head over to liveukulele.com and at very least sign up for my newsletter. You'll get a few welcome emails with some tips on how to play cleaner, and then also roll into some monthly resources, free resources from the website that I highlight to just share what is there and what is available to you. And you can also check out the store page and pick yourself up a video course or an ebook to further your learning, get hold of some great lesson material, and also support the work that I do here on Live Ukulele. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. And if you're really inclined, you could leave a review. Any or all of those things can help us stay in touch. And of course, if you ever want to reach out, you can reach me directly, brad@liveukulele.com. All right, so the key to being an annoying ukulele player, I'm going to try and break this list down and get 5 different aspects going here. So far I have 4 on my list, and I'll think of one more as we're going. Of course, this is not meant to be gospel or the law of ukulele at all. It's just some things that I've noticed in my travels of music and ukulele land, and thought it would be humorous to share in an educational sort of a way. All right, and the first way to be an annoying ukulele player is to be a know-it-all. If you have spent any time at ukulele clubs or jams or whatever, there's always that person who seems to think that they're smarter than everybody else, that they play better than everybody else, and they would like to tell you about it and tell you how you should do it according to them. So this is not inherently a problem, because there is a place in learning ukulele for criticism and, feedback on what you're playing. And even if that criticism and feedback is negative, then you still can learn something from that. However, the problem with the know-it-all ukulele player is that they're typically not as good as they would have you think, right? And so you want to be taking your criticism from people who you genuinely look up to and admire, and you hear them play and you go, wow, they're really good. I wish I could do XYZ like them. That's a very genuine kind of response when you listen to somebody playing music. I do that all the time. I go and see my peers play here and there at gigs, or I run across somebody at a gig and I'm wow, that sounds really good. That's somebody who has the juice, who I would, if they told me something about my playing or made an observation or a feedback about my playing, I would be inclined, as long as it was polite criticism, I'd be inclined to hear that and be to reflect upon it, right? Not to accept it. Because as far as criticism goes, there is unhelpful criticism. There are things that we don't need to hold on to. But it is good to take it all into account, because somebody who is hearing you from the outside, they might recognize something that you have never thought about before, because everybody's brain is wired different. We all notice different things. that is pretty normal to miss something and maybe somebody else brings it to your attention. And then once you're thinking about it, you reflect and you go, oh my gosh, like they're totally right. Like this is something that I do that I can improve upon. So if said know-it-all ukulele player does not exude that confidence, or you don't have that confidence in their ability, then like you don't have to accept anything that they share. A lot of it is just hot air. They want to feel special, yada, yada. The problem, though, is that these kind of people tend to be sort of loud. And when they share something out into the world, they share it as undisputable fact, when in fact, it's not always accurate information that they are sharing out into the world. And so there is a lot of this kind of thing that seasoned players spend a lot of time undoing because of, generalizations or bad intel, or, I heard it from so-and-so. Like somebody said that this is bad or this is good or whatever. And, all the ukulele instructors are like, okay, well, here's the actuality, right? Here's what 20 years of experience says. Not really. So just something to be aware of. Like this one's pretty self-explanatory. But if you don't want to be an annoying ukulele player, don't try and tell everybody what to do. That's great. Okay, the next one is a major pet peeve of mine. And I have great examples for this one. But it is, if you're going to be an annoying ukulele player, you're going to play too loud when it's not time to play loud. Okay? There's many different styles of this, but in general, if you can master this, you're going to come across as a much better musician than maybe you think you are. Because dynamics are super important. Dynamics make room for everything else. And in the right situation, dynamics can really make or break a piece as you're playing it. This mostly has to do with playing with others. If you're playing too loud, you're drowning other people out and you're imposing your playing on the performance or the music that is being made. If you're playing extra super loud, somebody next to you is getting drowned by your ukulele. They can't hear themselves, and your ukulele is taking major precedence over the other instruments that are in the space. And in certain situations, this is good because if everybody's lost, but you know where the beat is, if you jump in and you play a little bit louder, you can kind of get the train back on the rails. But the problem is when people who really have no right to be loud are super loud or super loud in the wrong situations. Right? Especially if you're playing off of time or like you don't have really excellent rhythm or you're playing the wrong chords, like playing loud can really throw other people off. They're going to be hearing your ukulele front and center. And if you play something wrong, they're going to second guess and be like, okay, well, where is the beat? Or you play the wrong chord and it's like, oh, I thought it was this chord when they're actually wrong. And you go and you second guess and all of a sudden you're behind and you're all mixed up. Like it's not a super service for the other people in the group. And then like that's more like strumming style kinds of stuff. But when you get into the place of like picking and soloing, that's a really exciting thing for people because it's sort of freeing, it's expressive, you just play whatever you want. And once you get over that learning curve, it's really tempting to just solo all the time. Like any place that you could possibly want to solo, you just solo and you pick on top of it. But the problem is not everywhere is appropriate for a solo. There is 2 places that it's appropriate to play that sort of a part, right? Or maybe 3. The first one is like a written piece, like a written riff that is intentional for the song. Maybe it's a melody or a riff that you come back to in the song. Like that is a picking part that you're supposed to put in the song. Okay. The other place you play is during an actual solo. Like here is 8 bars or 16 bars that's meant to be a solo. Take a paani. Great. Then you rip it up. You do your thing. And then the last place is as a fill, right? Vocalists especially don't like to... Singing's hard. It's hard enough already. And a lot of times if you're singing the lead part of a song, like it's already very vulnerable. You're putting yourself out there as the singer. Or maybe if you're like more of a diva type. That is your space. As the singer, you're carrying the melody. Everything else is there to support it. That's just the way music works. Like, there are exceptions where the vocals are a background thing, but then it's not a lead vocal. But if it's a lead vocal, everything else gets out of the way. That's just what makes music work. And then in between vocal lines, there can be little things that embellish in between. You play a little bit louder, you dig in, you play a few notes as a little phrase that connects the space between the melody to the next melody, vocal melody. This is probably the biggest trap, okay? Because if you have a set picking part that you're supposed to play in the song, that's great. You know exactly where it goes. If you have a solo section, you also know exactly where that goes. But if you're playing fills and you're filling in between the vocal part, you're improvising stop and go in a very specific spot. And first of all, if you don't know how the vocal melody goes, it's hard to get into that fill and then out of that fill in time to honor the vocals. Like it's not a major sin, like if you do play a little bit over the vocal, but like if you play a bar of extra fill when the vocal is supposed to already have been starting, then that becomes like a little bit of, you're competing for space, right? The vocal melody is fighting with the fill. Assuming that the fill is played at a volume that is also a feature volume, I guess. If you were to play like a little fill at a very small volume, soft volume, that's one thing. But if you're like, hey, I am intentionally playing this fill to connect the dots between here and here, then you better get the hell out of the way when the vocal's going to come back in. That's just the way it is. But the trick is that it's easy to get into a groove of like, I'm playing a fill, okay, now I'm waiting, and I'm playing a fill, and now I'm waiting, and you get antsy, and you start playing more and more and more until you're diddling over the whole song. This is a major problem, and this will make everybody who notices it cranky, pretty much. Like, if you don't realize what is happening, it might not annoy you, but for anybody who's kind of, experienced in music, this is going to drive them crazy. Unless, well, not even unless, because even if you're an amazing player, if you go and play with Jake and he's diddling all the time over the top of what you're trying to sing, it doesn't matter if it's good because it's not appropriate for the music. And Jake's a good enough musician to know this, and he would get out of the way and he wouldn't play in that spot. But this is a real thing and a real problem, and it's sort of a humility thing because you have to realize that not all of the music is for you. When you're playing, not everything is about what you're going to play, especially if you do have some comfort in soloing, you do like the expression of soloing. It's tempting to feel a little bit highbrow about that aspect of music. It's a little bit more of an advanced concept, like I know how to do this and other people don't. Like even if you are not, arrogant about like, oh yeah, I'm such a good soloer. Like you don't have to be like that to still think that is an exciting piece of music that you want to do more of. And especially if you're playing with a group that doesn't honor that or give space for that specifically, it can be a little bit tricky to tamp down that want. Like, I want to shred, I want to shred, I want to shred. So the fills in between become shredding all the time. It's just something to be aware of. But I've played with people who do that in the past. I'm sure I'll play with people who do that in the future. And like immediately, that is one of the most annoying things. And like as a sound person or somebody who like runs, a lot of times runs our own sound if I'm playing in a group, that's the first thing I'll turn down. If you're just diddling all the time, you're going way lower than everybody else, because usually a good musical group will kind of mix itself. Like I know that when it's not my turn to solo, like I'm playing quieter, I'm in the background, I'm supporting. And then when it is time for me to play louder, I will push my sound out, dig in a little bit more so that I have more volume to step into that role. But if it's always loud and you're always diddling and you're always in the wrong place, then the only way to fix that in a performance sense, woe is you if you're playing acoustic with this kind of a person. But if you're playing with a PA or something, like you turn that person down, like get out of here. That's not appropriate for the music in this moment. And I do that. It's annoying to have to do that because I feel like, at this point, I would like to play with musicians who have that sensibility and that humility to know that it's not always about their diddle on the ukulele. A great example of somebody who is super duper humble about this is Blaina Singh, who I had the privilege to play with this past Saturday at a show at Kahilu Theater. He jumped in for a handful of songs when I was playing with Kingside. And the dude is an insane guitarist, insane songwriter, insane singer, just like top level musician. But he's also super humble. And when he was joining in our songs, like he can shred the most amazing solo you've ever heard, but he doesn't. He sits way back. He makes sure he knows exactly what's happening and never gets carried away with a fill that is going to step on any other part of the music. Right? And that sensibility is huge. And that is probably one of the main reasons that it was a total joy to play with him. Just because like, that anything you're doing is working in context with the music, and that like, we as a band have our songs and our parts and like, we know what's going on. And to be able to invite somebody up to the stage who we don't have to worry about, like, are they going to be a pain in the ass because they're always trying to step on what we're doing? No, like in this case, like, no, everything was super tasteful. And when it was like, your turn, Blaine, like, go, then he just plays this crazy solo that's super great. And then, gets out and goes back to, really tasteful backup. And that's such a treat because it is kind of rare. So definitely, if you don't want to be an annoying ukulele player, you want to really be mindful about playing on top of other people and playing too loudly. And the two are, sort of similar and sort of related. If you're playing in the wrong place, even if it's quiet, dynamically compared to what's supposed to be happening in the music, it still might be super loud. Right? If you're playing on top of the singer, any playing at that moment, not necessarily, not anything. Like there's no hard and fast rules about what can and can't happen, because there might be like a picking part that happens underneath the singer. That is a thing. But if you're just diddling and not really adding anything in a constructive, intelligent sort of a way, then it is too loud, even if you're playing super soft. Like it is too loud because it's not appropriate in that moment. Okay. A great way to get a little bit of a reference for what I'm talking about is to go listen to some blues guitar players. Like if you listen to B.B. King, if you watch or even watch B.B. King, you watch B.B. King, he literally takes his hands off his guitar when he's singing. He's never playing while he's singing. He sings a little bit, he grabs his guitar and he plays, and then he stops playing and he sings. That's how B.B. King did his thing. Like that was the call and response. He sang a little bit, fill a little bit, sing a little bit, fill a little bit. There was never any of it happening at the same time. And it can be really cool when it's happening at the same time. Like I've seen guitarists play crazy stuff when they're singing. Like for instance, Neon by John Mayer comes to mind. Like playing the playing that guitar part on top and then singing on top of it. That's crazy. But that's a written part. That's supposed to be there. That's like part of the song. But for the most part, blues players have that back and forth style. So it's really obvious where you have a fill and then the fill is over. You know, I'm sure that in the blues jam world, there are lots of people who diddle all the time. Like, I'm sure of it. Because that is, you know, a lot of hobby guitar players love playing blues stuff because it's fairly easy to solo in a blues style. And because of that, you're going to have a lot of beginners who are excited about soloing. And they're so excited that they play all the time. They solo the whole way through. And that is no bueno. Here's one that you probably don't expect. If you want to be an annoying ukulele player, you should be overly shy and overly humble about your music and never share it with anybody. Okay? And I say this with no judgment as somebody who is shy and tends to be overwhelmed by social stuff. Like, don't talk to me. I'm in my zone, man. You know, I get it. But also, I think that there's a certain point where, and you know, if you're not intending to be a performer and music is just for you, that's another thing. But as somebody who has come up with kind of the intention of being a professional musician and seeing a lot of peers who also have that intention or at least have that skill level, it was always super annoying when somebody wouldn't want to share their music. It's kind of like the overly humble thing. Like, oh no, I'm not really that good. Like, no, I don't have anything to share. I'm not that good. And it's like, no, I know that's not true because I've heard you playing. I know that you're amazing. I want to hear you play a song. And it's not like any of us can, unless you pay for a concert ticket, like you can't just demand a song. Like that's rude too. But at the same time, like if you have that talent, you have that skill, I think personally that one of the most beautiful things about music is that we get to share it out in the world and it touches people and it makes people feel a certain way. And if you can bring your audience up with you, like, I don't know. I've always felt like that's the kuleana of music. That's the end goal, is like to make people feel something from playing music that sounds nice. Or like, you know, our show the other night with Blaine, like that was a dance party. Like our whole purpose was to play music for people so that they could forget about their worries for a couple of hours and just dance their brains out. That was the whole point. And, you know, granted that was a ticketed show, but even yet, like even in a small situation, like, you know, oh, like, I know you've been practicing for a couple of years now. Like, you know, could you play us a song? To me, I think the answer should typically try to be yes. Like, if you're able, if you can get over your nerves, if you can do that, I think you should definitely try. Because I know growing up that there were a handful of kids in the cohort who, you know, like, oh man, like that's sick. What are you doing? Like, play that for me. Like, oh no, like, no, I'm ashamed, blah, blah, blah. And that was always kind of annoying. It was kind of a bummer because it's like, you know, obviously there's something there. You wouldn't be playing like that if there wasn't something there. And that goes sort of hand in hand. This is not really an annoying thing, but sort of a follow through thing. If you're not following through, that's annoying too. I've been here and done this all, by the way. But having something in your back pocket to share is, in my opinion, should be a high priority for every ukulele player. Even if you're just really casual, it's great to have an entire song that you can play all the way through and feel pretty confident about it. That is a good thing to practice towards. Because if even if you're not a super shy person, but you just don't have an entire song, that's kind of lame, right? If somebody asks, like, oh, can you play me something? Like, I'd love to hear what you can play. Even if it's the same song that you play for everybody, at least having one song that you can go all the way through and kind of rock out a little bit and feel good about it, that's a big boon to every ukulele player to have that in the bag of tricks. A finished song. Because when I was young and practicing and learning all the stuff, it was a little disjointed, right? Because back then there was not Moises. There wasn't much YouTube. Like Jake had just come out with Gently Weeps at Central Park. And so it was like a little bit here, a little bit there, and lots of listening to the radio. Like, wow, that's cool. You try and figure out the riff. You look up that one specific song and you download that one specific song and then you learn the riff. Well, that's cool. Especially for like local Hawaiian music that we were listening to on the radio. It was like the riff. But like the rest of the song, you didn't care so much about. It was the fact that, there was a sick ukulele player jamming his ukulele on this song. You learn that part, you move on. So there were like tons of little pieces floating around for all of us young people in kind of that age range, and just that amount of ability in general. There's lots of pieces, but what really brings it all together is when you start learning an entire song and you have a song from end to end that you can play all the way through and do it well. So if you don't have that, I would highly encourage you to sit down and try and work up a song or a couple songs if you want to be ambitious, but a song that you can play when somebody says, oh, can you play me something? I'd love to hear what you can play. That is great. And then if somebody does ask, you're prepared and you don't have to say, no, I don't really play. I don't have anything. You can say like, yeah, I've got this one song. And if you want to hear more, sorry, I don't know any more songs. This is the one song I know. But just that little bit, at least you're, making that effort towards sharing the music with other people. So if you have that gift, or if you want to build that gift or create that gift, however you want to think about it, it's very worth sharing. And it's less annoying when you do share, for the most part. And it's also a great growing opportunity. If you don't, for myself, being pretty shy and quiet, the obvious tendency as that kind of a person is to hide in a shell and to not want to share, to not want to get out and do that. But over the years, I've built that confidence. You crash and burn and you play a song for somebody and you're so nervous, you're shaking, you can hardly play. And you kind of get through it and okay, nobody died. That was okay, I guess. And then you do it again. And every time it gets a little bit easier until you get to the point where you enjoy it. You enjoy bringing music to people and sharing it with people so that it's not just for you. It's something that other people can partake in. And now I've gotten to the point where I've done it so much that, get a big kick out of playing music for people. That's why we do it. It's super fun. You get to, especially for a dance party like we played the other night, getting to play music that people dance to is a super treat because that's, they're engaged with their ears and with their bodies, and it becomes kind of a reciprocal thing. It's not just you playing a song out into the world. You're playing a song that other people can interact with, and they give you some of that energy back from their integration with the music as listeners. Okay, here's an annoying thing that I will claim as an ukulele instructor. This is going to rub some people the wrong way. All right? And that is playing only with a sheet. Music is such a beautiful experience for everybody involved, usually, assuming it's good. Sometimes it's traumatic, but usually it's good. But using a sheet really takes you out of it. Your ability to, as a human, share in that experience of music. So just like learning a song, I feel strongly that if you can, if you're able, that getting off of the sheet music eventually, or challenging yourself every once in a while, is a big way to improve and increase your enjoyment of playing music. Because having that sheet music in front of you, I do think it makes you play worse. I've taught classes where it's like, I'll give you the handout at the end, and we learn a part, and I get them playing the part, and it sounds pretty good. And then I pass out the sheet. It's like, okay, let's try it again. And it all falls apart. It sounds way worse once they have the sheet. So I've seen this in person. I don't think, provided you have a chance to practice and to learn, I don't think the sheet does anything for you except really take you out of the music. And when you're out of the music, you're unable to use any of your other senses to follow the song, right? That's what the sheet is there for, is for following the song and for knowing what the chords are, knowing what the words are. That's a reference point. But if you're stuck to it, you're not able to look to the next person. I'm thinking of Uncle George's big jam at his workshop. You're not able to look across the way and watch the 10 instructors who are here who have won, God knows how many hokus between all of them, to watch them playing in this moment and interacting with each other. You don't get any of that. You don't get to look at your friend and grin because, we're rocking out. Like it's so one-dimensional to be staring at that page that I do think it's a little bit of a detriment. And granted, there are styles, like if you're playing classical ukulele or whatever, like, classical music is kind of its own thing. It has its own pedagogy and curriculum and its own approach. And that approach is very much orchestral. Like you look at your sheet, you play it exactly like it's written. Don't deviate, don't improvise, none of that. And, a lot of orchestra players, like they can't play by ear just because they never learned that. That was never part of the expectation of being first chair violin or whatever it might be. To my understanding, I've never played in an orchestra. So there are times when you will look at a sheet and if I'm learning a song or whatever, like I will look at a reference to see, what's going on. Or if I need to learn lyrics, like I will look at the lyrics to see and to learn. But then once you have it just a little bit, the best way to ingrain it is to just play it a bunch of times and to try and interact in other ways. And I know there are a lot of times when you go to a big jam and you don't know any of the songs. You never played any of the songs before. That's fine. There's still a lot of music that you can learn and pick up on. It takes a little bit longer, but at least you're involved in the music. You can look with your eyes to see what people are playing on their instruments. You can use your ears to try and decide when the chord changes. And then the only thing you're lacking are the words, right? And if you're a singer, you really like the singing part of ukulele, maybe you do need to look at the words in order to know what the lyrics are. But as far as just strumming along, especially if you're somebody who doesn't sing, all you're getting are kind of the order of the chords. It's not even really telling you where the chords are to look at an ukulele sheet. So as an instructor, it drives me crazy that students are missing out on so much without even knowing it. Like all that, the magical human moments of the music, especially in a big group, like they just completely pass you by. And then, and I see this at Uncle George's workshop, is everybody's looking at the song, everybody's playing, like they're having as good a time as they can have. And then like something happens in, I don't know, we're cracking jokes or whatever as we're playing and leading the songs. And then everybody looks up and they've already missed what happened, right? They can only they're laughing. So it must have been funny. So now I'll laugh. But you don't actually get to be a part of a moment that could have been hilarious because of something that happened. Because I guarantee you, if you go to Uncle George's workshop to the jam, there's always something going on. One of us is always poking one of the other instructors musically, haha, what if we did this? Haha. That's just the interaction. That's what happens when you kind of free yourself from the sheet. And so, if you can, be bold, ditch that sheet and just try and figure it out as you go. It's hard at first. You'll be lost a lot of the time, but at least you won't be lost from the music. You'll be able to, still enjoy. And in a group, you don't have to hold anything up. Like, unless you're the group leader, unless you have a critical role or it's a real itty bitty group, like Uncle George's workshop, there's like 80 people at the Big Kani Kapila. Like, you can just sit there all night and just listen and just absorb. Like, if you miss a chord, it's not a major deal. Just try and do your best, follow along, catch up. Easier said than done. But I do think that it's super important, and I do think that it leaves a lot on the table, and it annoys me as a teacher. Because I wish for everybody to just experience music. That's like my thing. Like, get over yourself and just experience music. It doesn't have to be great. Just do something. Okay, and just to wrap things up with a fifth item, once more, as an instructor, or even as a member of the cohort, something that annoys me is when people ask too many questions. Just from a learning standpoint, not necessarily music specific, but from a learning standpoint. And, I picked this up from hanging out with, Hawaiians and cultural practitioners and people like that. Hawaiian style is like, you don't ask questions unless you really can't figure it out. Like, just pay attention, listen, watch, and you'll figure it out. Like, that's how Hawaiians learn. And that's why Hawaiians play by ear for the most part. Like, that's the method of learning, is because it's not taught actively. You're not like spoon-fed everything. Right? The Hawaiian saying is "Nana komaka ho'olohe ko pepeau pa'akavaha," which means open your eyes, listen with your ears, and shut your mouth, and you'll learn. That is just the method for learning here. And so you pick that up over time and realize how much can be said for that style of learning. And then when I go and I teach a group lesson and there's somebody who's like, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about that? If you, instead of thinking of your questions in your head, like relaxed into the moment and paid attention, you deduce what the answer to your question is 99% of the time. And then that last 1%, like, ask away. And that's probably going to be a higher quality question by the time you get there. And I think this kind of has a lot to do with people's aptitude for teaching themselves, right? Some people just don't have that angle on their brain. Like, that's fine. They just don't get it in that way. But a lot of people do and can, and they've just been conditioned to always knowing everything, right? Especially Western style people, lawyers and medical people and this, that, and the other thing. Like, everything is very exact. And when they're unsure about something, like, everything up until that point, a lot in like professional career types of folks, everything up to that point has been laid out very specifically for them to know and to understand. And that's the procedure. That's it. But when you get into this other style of, more intuitive Hawaiian style learning, there's not as much of that. You don't have as much to hang on to. So I think that, like, letting things play out and watching and paying attention isn't as developed of a skill in a lot of Western folks, just because of society. Like, it's nothing inherently wrong with them, but it is also something to recognize and to think about and realize that that is a good way to learn as well. Just paying attention, trying to keep up from that standpoint. And I think if you kind of switch that mode, you'll realize that you can really learn a lot if you just pay attention. And maybe it's the homeschooler in me where, we were teaching ourselves a lot of the time and like, whoa, check out this bug. Like, it was a lot of organic learning with those kinds of lived experiences. And like, whoa, check out this bug. What kind of bug is it? I don't know. Let's look it up. And then you like figure it out as you go. And it's the same kind of thing with music, and especially with taking classes. And I'm not saying, like, if you go to a private lesson or something and you have like, well, I've been working on this all week and I have this, and this question. That's sort of a different thing. But like on the fly as you're going, I think this mostly applies to group classes. If the teacher has some sort of an idea what the class is, not private lesson style, but if there is some sort of a curriculum that the teacher is working through, odds are they've thought through a lot of the possible questions and that they have a set of things that they're trying to answer and they're trying to show. And a good teacher will cover all of those things. And you don't usually need to ask a million questions. So questions are good, but also too many questions can be a little bit annoying because a lot of times it will come around and you will understand just organically, just from watching, just from listening. All right, so if you made it this far, thanks for hanging out. I hope that wasn't too snarky. I think there's some good points in there, it's mostly just awareness. Like the majority of what I do as a teacher is just pointing things out that people don't realize. If somebody's like, I'm having trouble with this thing, blah, 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 blah. Like, oh, well, like you just are not realizing this one aspect of it. And then you point it out. They go, oh, okay. And then they change and the problem is solved. That's the majority of what I find teaching is, for the most part. So same sort of situation here, just bringing some things to your attention, hopefully in a little bit of a fun way. Because we've all experienced it. There are things that irk us, and certainly this is not a comprehensive list, but just a handful of things to think about, some of the biggest offenders, and some food for thought. The Live Ukulele podcast is published on the first Saturday of every month. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, if you want to support the cause, check out liveukulele.com/store. Check out one of my video lessons or ebooks. That funding goes directly into the time that I put towards the website and towards the podcast. And or if you're not already, please go to liveukulele.com/sign up and get registered for my newsletter so we can be in direct contact. I'll catch you in the next episode. Be well out there. Stay safe. Peace. Ahui ho.